Ellie, I think we're good. Nathan, are we good? South side, yeah.
Yes, we are good to go.
Okay, perfect. Okay. The record reflect that it's 5:30. We'll call this meeting back to order. And the next agenda topic is the public hearing on the fiscal year 2018-2019 growth management plan and general plan annual monitoring report given by the Director of Transportation, Tom Frank. Mr. Frank.
Great. Thank you, Chair. And you did a terrific job of introducing the item. So I just wanted to start off by thanking the Commission in advance for all the efforts you had taken over the last couple of days to review this lengthy and technical report. It was over 270 pages. It's not an easy read, and the issues can be a bit mind-bending considering all the different reports and reference documents and attachments. But I'm actually a bit excited to present this issue because these monitoring reports encompass all aspects of mobility planning. Additionally, I want to thank the commissioners, specifically Commissioner Linke, for providing his questions and comments in a really timely manner to us. And that helps us address many of his comments and provide hopefully some information in this presentation. Commissioner Linke's questions and comments help address key issues with the monitoring program and our mobility planning efforts moving forward. So we greatly appreciate that. Following my presentation, we're pleased to answer any questions. Hopefully I answer some of the issues in my presentation. We have our transportation department and city attorney staff available to answer questions. In addition, we have Mr. Michael Loomis with Kimley Horn, who is a consultant who completed the traffic monitoring report on this item. So just starting off with staff's recommendations for you, the Traffic and Safety or Traffic and Mobility Commission. Our recommendation is to provide a recommendation to City Council to 1, receive and file the growth management plan, the general plan annual monitoring report circulation section. 2, determine 6 street facilities deficient. And then 3, determine the 6 deficient street facilities built out and exempt from the vehicular level of service standpoint. Before I get into the details of the circulation section, I just wanted to provide a high-level overview of the growth management plan. Excuse me. The growth management tool, it's been a growth management tool since 1986. It ensures new growth doesn't outpace public facilities. It establishes citywide and quadrant housing caps, and it establishes performance standards for the public facilities. Development cannot proceed until deficiencies are addressed. And regarding the Commission's purview, the circulation section is the focus of this report. To help set our perspective when reviewing such a complex issue as this report, I think it's helpful to remind our the city's approach. I'm sorry, what's that?
I think we're breaking up a little bit. Is anyone else having issues or?
Yeah, Tom froze there for a while.
Oh, I see. I just got a notice on my screen that my internet connection is unstable. So hopefully, just let me know if I drop the. I guess if I get disconnected, I'll log back in, and I apologize.
No problem.
So I'll start off. Hopefully, you did you hear where I started off with getting a good perspective on our issues and starting off with section 3.3. So.
We probably missed the last minute or so of what you said.
Okay, well, I'll just keep it brief on this slide then. So section 3.3, the highlights are The city's approach is to provide livable streets, recognizes that the optimum level of service cannot be provided for all travel modes on streets within the city due to competing interests. The mobility element utilizes a livable street approach to provide a balanced mobility system. And I think that's the
Mr. Frank, I don't believe the slide is advancing.
oh, it's not.
Beyond,
Okay.
yeah, it's showing slide 3 on the screen. It may have just been a hiccup with the internet connection.
Okay, thank you. I think, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm going to stop the slideshow and restart it, and then hopefully I can resume because it appears to be locked up. Or at least I'll try and stop sharing and see if reshare and see if that helps.
So Tom, you stop sharing.
Yeah, I'm restarting the PowerPoint.
Okay, good.
It's back.
Yeah.
A little too far there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having some difficulties here. Let me try it one more time. I'm having difficulties with my PowerPoint.
Is it in the Q drive, Tom, that maybe either Ellie or Nathan can pull up for you?
It is. Let me try one more time here, just because I have notes attached. And yeah, if it doesn't work this time, we can go with the backup plan.
You're on slide 4.
Okay. Yeah. So
One of us could share the screen.
Yeah,
here
yeah.
If you let us,
Yeah.
if you just tell us when to advance.
I think I actually have it here. Or yeah, why don't you do that, John? If you want to share the screen.
Okay, I'll do that.
Or Ellie, actually, you might be able to do it if you have it downloaded here.
I have it. I can do, I'm trying to stop yours, okay?
Actually, let me try it one more time. It might have been, I'm going to save it to my desktop. I apologize for the delay. But the backup, it doesn't seem to be working.
Okay. So do you want to stop sharing and I can pull it up?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm having trouble.
You try. I'm gonna try to share my screen.
Okay,
Third time's a charm.
yeah, should. Oh, he was right there. Good.
Okay, so just tell me which slide to go to.
Okay, so I think we're on, let's see, I think we're on slide 4.
Okay.
Okay, so section, so I guess I'll just, yeah, I guess what we can just, so yeah, basically the mobility element utilizes a living street approach to provide a balanced mobility system. And that's the key word here, is balance. So sometimes it's challenging given all the different MMLOS modes that we're trying to address. So next slide, please. So let's start off with mobility plan performance standards. Implementing a comprehensive livable streets network that serves all the users of the system, including vehicles, pedestrians, bicycles, and public transit. Secondly, maintain a level of service D or better for all the modes that are subject to this multimodal level of service standard. And also that excludes the level of service exemptions for intersections and streets that are approved by the City Council. If the performance standard is not met, the facility is deemed deficient. So next slide. So what does it mean if a facility is deemed deficient? This is one of the key issues for the presentation tonight. When a deficiency is determined to exist, the City Council can either adopt measures to address the deficiency or determine that the facility is built out and exempt from the LOS standard. If the council determines that a deficiency exists, then no further building or development permits can be issued within the affected zone or zones, and the development shall cease until an amendment to the citywide facilities and improvement plan or the applicable local facilities management plan, which addresses the deficiency, is approved by the City Council and the performance standard is met. However, the Senate Bill 330 has established no moratorium on dwelling units and no dwelling unit caps. Next slide, please. So actually, I think this is a little older version, but when a circulation deficiency is determined to exist, City Council can normally, one, adopt physical improvements that would improve the vehicular LOS deficiency to the LOS D standard or better. An example of this option is the street facility of southbound College Boulevard from Aston Avenue to Palomar Airport Road, which was previously identified during the FY 2017-2018 Growth Management Plan Monitoring Report and approved by the City Council in December of 2019. Secondly, it could adopt a moratorium to prohibit development and the issuance of building permits in the affected local facilities management zones until the performance standard is met. However, as a result of Senate Bill 330, the city attorney does not believe that the city has this option of implementing a moratorium in these circumstances. Or lastly, the street facilities exempt from the vehicular LOS performance standard under the mobility element policy 3-P-9, thereby prioritizes transportation demand management and transportation system management measures to improve vehicular congestion. So what is TDM? Transportation demand management consists of programs and policies to reduce the demand for single occupant automobiles. The citywide TDM plan consists of infrastructure, regulations and policies, guiding resources, and TDM program. Any steps that can reduce people's dependence on solo commuting can be a part of the transportation demand management plan. The idea is to reduce the demand for people to drive by themselves, particularly during peak hours, by telecommuting or altering work schedules, creating other transportation options, making biking to work easier, offering amenities to the job site, and providing incentives that might encourage people to break their commuter habits. So TDM is critical, or excuse me, TDM is critical for the city to build out without expanding the transportation net infrastructure beyond what is envisioned in the mobility element.
Are we still on slide 7?
Yeah, we're still on slide 7. So what is TSM? So transportation system management could take the forms of minor changes or major improvements to the system. This might entail coordinating the timing of traffic signals to avoid unnecessary delays, having carpool or bus only lanes, and removing parking spaces to make more room for possibly another vehicle lane or an added dedicated bicycle lane. Next slide, please. So next slide, John, if you can. So when would the city consider vehicular LOS exemptions? To exempt the vehicle mode of travel from the LOS standard at a particular intersection or segment, it must first be identified as built out by the city council because A, acquiring the right of way is not feasible, or B, the proposed improvements would impact the environment in an unacceptable way, and mitigation would not contribute to the 9 core values of the city's community vision, or C, the improvements would result in unacceptable impacts to other community values or general plan policies, or last item, the proposed improvements would require more than 3 through travel lanes in each direction. Next slide, please. I can't, is the next, what slide are you on there, John?
Number 9.
Okay, so let's, yeah, number 9. So let's review the multimodal level service standard. The mobility element utilizes a living streets approach to provide a balanced mobility system that identifies the location and type of street for the different travel modes. Table 3.1 of the mobility element defines street typology on and determines the travel modes are subject to the MMLOS D standard. The summary of these typologies and modes is provided in Table 9 in Attachment A of the staff report. For example, the vehicular mode of travel is subject to the MMLOS D standard are shown here as the arterial streets, the arterial connector streets, and the industrial streets. Next slide, please. So the street network map is shown in figure 3.1 in the mobility element and shown on your screen, which depicts the street typologies throughout the city and includes both existing and planned streets. Next slide, please. Traffic volume data was collected when school, or excuse me, so let's go over the methodology or the methods for the different modes of travel. Going over the vehicle LOS. The traffic volume data was collected when school was in session, and mostly in early May of 2019, as well as follow-up counts along Palomar Airport Road and El Camino Real in September of 2019. And that additional data was collected in September to address some discrepancy in the data. We found some evidence that the traffic counts didn't make sense, and it might have been in regards to some construction on those segments, but we're not exactly sure what caused the discrepancy. Next slide, please. In addition, the facilities LOS methodology is based on the Highway Capacity Manual method. Monitoring results reflect conditions at the time of data collection. And then lastly, elevating the list of exempt street facilities as a part of the growth management monitoring program to determine if such exemptions are still warranted. And that's really a key issue that we'll go over when we go into the specific next slide, please. So when evaluating our current monitoring program's level of service, we identified 7 facilities as falling short of the vehicular level of service performance standard that have not been previously exempt by the City Council. And I know this is a really busy slide, and I actually have slides following this slide that represent each of the road facility, and we can go into a detailed analysis of each on those slides. But I did want to point out that street facility number 2, southbound College Avenue, southbound College from Aston to Palomar Airport Road was previously determined to be deficient by the City Council in December of 2019. Next slide, please. The vehicular level of service results are also illustrated in Figure 4 in Exhibit A of the staff report, and shows the level of service rating and roadways exempt from the level of service are highlighted with the black dashed lines. In addition, so what you can see in the legend here, the facility segments that are the orange yellowish color are level of service E, and the red roadway facilities that are shown in red, those are level of service ratings E and F. So those are the ones of concern. In addition, the segments that are outlined by the blue dashed line, those are alignments that have been previously exempt. So the roadway facility segments, which we're going to be looking at in more detail, that are not meeting the level of service are shown with, and highlighted with dark black circles. So we'll go into more detail on the following slides. Next slide, please. So the street facilities, this is showing is street facilities items number 1 and 2 for Palomar Airport Road, from Avenidas Encinas to Paseo del Norte. And you can see in the top columns that the level of service is shown as F for both the AM and the PM peak hours. And this affects the LFMZ Zone 3. The rationale for bringing forward the exemption is because this area is constrained by the existing overpass over the North County Transit District Railroad. This area, if you can look at this, this is a great example to look through what our options are at this point. This roadway is actually developed to a width that could facilitate 3 lanes of travel in each direction. However, to the west of this segment, you have the railroad overpass, which is 1 lane in each direction. So that's what is causing the congestion for the west going traffic primarily. On the eastern direction, it's primarily caused by the interchange traffic and the tight confluence of the traffic signals near the interchange. So the exemption is per 3P9, which is acquiring the right of way is not feasible, and also it's unacceptable impacts to the community values for the other plan priorities policies. Next slide, please. So this segment, the street facility segment is, or street facility is College Boulevard from Carlsbad Village Drive to Oceanside City Limit, northbound only, and it affects the LFMZ Zone 7, and the deficiency is in the PM hours. The rationale for the exemption is widening College Boulevard to 3 lanes in each direction would require a right-of-way width of a prime arterial, which is 126 feet, and this is not feasible. By adding the additional travel lanes at the expense of both pedestrians and bicycle mobility, this is not consistent with other mobility element policies. This is exempt per, I believe it's the same exemption policies that I called out on the last one. Acquiring the right of way is not feasible, and unacceptable impacts to the other community values for other general plan policies. Now, to me, this is a great discussion point, because somebody might suggest that we should consider possibly intersection improvements, like maybe an additional dedicated right-hand turn at the intersections. But the intersections, actually, I believe the intersection shown in this picture just to the north is Tamarack Avenue, and that is a school typology, a school street typology. So pedestrians are a priority on the school typologies. So it just shows that you really have to look at the balance and the impacts to all the different modes of travel, and the impacts of all and the impacts to those different modes of travel when you're evaluating what the different options are for trying to improve the levels of service for one type of mode. Next slide, please. So this is showing the street facilities 4 and 5 along Cannon Road. It's from Avenidas Encinas to Paseo del Norte in the east and westbound directions. It has deficiencies in both the AM and the PM peak periods. Again, the rationale for the exemption is the acquisition of additional right-of-way at the I-5 interchange is not feasible. This is state freeways, and again, the exemption is per 3P A and C, which is acquiring the right-of-way is not feasible, and it's also unacceptable impacts to the community values and other general plan policies. Next slide, please. So this is street facility shown as number 7 in your staff report, El Camino Real from Tamarack Avenue to Cannon Road in the southbound direction. And this affects LFMZ 1 and 8. And the deficiency is in the AM peak hours. And adding more than 3 travel lanes in this segment would be inconsistent with the city policies and exempt per 3P9D, which is the proposed improvements would require more than 3 travel lanes in each direction. So that's where we're suggesting an exemption on this segment. Next slide, please. So in this table, it's just a recap of the different street facilities which we're recommending for the exemptions from the level of service and using the transportation demand management and TSM strategies. So if you have any particular questions on these during the questions and answers period, we'll be happy to go back to them. And you'll note here that the 7th street facility is not included in this because we're not including, or it's not our recommended facility to be included in council actions. So moving on to the multimodal level of service issues, the general plan mobility element calls for the use of multimodal level of service methodology, including bicycle, pedestrians, and transit modes of travel. In 2015, a high-level method was evaluating bike and pedestrian LOS was developed as a part of the general plan EIR. When the consultants applied the original method during the preparation of the impact studies, several limitations of this original method were discovered. Originally, a more detailed method was then developed, or accordingly, a more detailed method was then developed in 2018 to calculate the MMLOS for each mode and to identify a much broader range of improvements. Since this was the first time that the bike and the pedestrian travel modes were monitored using the MMLOS tool, staff has identified concerns with the initial results relating to the underlying MMLOS methodologies. Due to these concerns, the report does not include the MMLOS results at this time. Staff will reevaluate the MMLOS methodologies with the Traffic and Mobility Commission and will return with the MMLOS in early 2021. Next slide, please. So staff has heard the past concerns of the commission, and we've considered and incorporated these past suggestions while developing the next steps and recommendations for the commission to act on tonight and how we move forward with this item. The first suggestion is that the Traffic and Mobility Commission consider creating an ad hoc committee to address the MMLOS issue. And then staff is also planning to initiate a task order for a consultant to assist in addressing the MMLOS issue. Also, this item is going before the City Council on October 20th, including the Traffic and Mobility Commission's recommendation. And then lastly, so we can get ahead of the traffic monitoring program issues, we're planning to include the FY 2021 traffic monitoring program approach on the next Traffic and Mobility Commission agenda, the November agenda. So hopefully that helps with addressing some of the issues we've heard about in the past. And so again, here's our staff recommendations for the commission tonight, and that's to make a recommendation to City Council to approve the items which are listed in the staff report and shown here on the slide in front of you. So that concludes my presentation, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Actually, for this talk, there's something I just wanted to kind of go over. I think on that next steps, if we could address that right now. There was next steps was a Traffic and Mobility Commission considered creating an ad hoc committee to address the MMLOS. I'm not seeing that on the agenda, so I just wanted to get kind of a little bit of guidance. Am I missing something here, or is this something that we've already done? Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, that's something you haven't done. We're just as explained in the staff report, we have issues with the MMLOS data, so we were wanted to discuss with the commission how we can address that, and we're suggesting that we collaborate with the Traffic and Mobility Commission to address those issues, and we think the best way to move forward with that would be to form an ad hoc committee similar to what we have done with the Sustainable Mobility Plan.
SMP. Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks for the clarifications. Commissioners, I'm going to open this up. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Commissioner Lanke?
Yeah, and I don't need to go first if anybody else would like to, but obviously I have a lot of questions. So I submitted 7 questions in advance of the meeting and was hoping that as part of the process that those would be answered in advance, but I don't think any of them got answered. So first question, so each of these street facilities that's being proposed for an exemption has a single mid-block traffic count that was done to determine that it was deficient, but it's actually made up, each facility is made up of a series of intersections and street segments between those intersections. And the guidance in one of our own GMP monitoring reports says that with this service volume approach that we're using, that it's only intended to identify generally whether a facility is deficient, and that there should be more detailed operational analyses done on the individual segments and the individual intersections. So for all these proposed facilities, and for the 6 that are the subject, were those more detailed analyses done on the individual segments and intersections as recommended in our own guidelines?
Yeah, so thanks for submitting the questions. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get refined or complete written responses to you in time for this meeting, so I apologize for that. But Nathan has been working on those responses. So Nathan, do you want to take the lead in responding to that question?
Yeah. So you're right that staff we didn't identify any physical improvements to improve the vehicular level service at these locations. As we're going through the process and just doing the planning level analysis, we did consider things such as physical roadway elements, such as the right-of-way width, constraints, the balancing all of the different travel modes. And I think those elements are discussed in our justification for a rationale for exemption. And Mr. Commissioner Link, you're also right that the analysis is, it's in accordance with the HCM. And it is a mainline analysis, meaning that the most sensitive elements of part of that analysis, which would result in improved level of service, would be the adding of additional through lanes. So that again is why that's the first thing that staff reviewed when taking a look at these for mitigation options, and then we considered other options if they were apparent and available to do so.
Okay, but I would argue that through lanes aren't necessarily the only improvements. That if we did intersection analyses, for example, that might help identify physical changes that could be made, and also traffic signal changes to optimize things. So the fact that we're not seeing basically any, unlike the previous set of 8 deficiencies that we got the last time, where there were several cases where it could be solved, like with the College Boulevard extension and with the right-hand turn lane on southbound College, which is the 7th one for tonight, but those solved it. And then there was another case where there was a right turn lane that, while it didn't solve it, it helped boost the service up. So without doing that, those sorts of analyses that I think we really need to be doing with this, and without, any effort to look at what could be done like the last time, I don't necessarily agree with these exemptions. The next question is, there was a huge emphasis then put in the staff report on, okay, we're claiming that we can't do any physical improvements, even though maybe it wasn't looked at in much detail. So therefore we have to do TSM and TDM. Yet I'll ask the question, were any TSM or TDM projects to address these particular facilities looked at to see if they could improve it? Because there aren't any presented in the staff report. It's again just, we need to do them, but we're not, we're basically not going to look at doing them.
We did do a high-level review of potential or candidate intersection improvements that possibly could be done, such as additional turn lanes or any significant improvements to our traffic signals. But we didn't see any items that could really change the level of service dramatically that would have significant changes for these road facilities. So we did look at it from a high level. We didn't have a consultant do an intersection analysis. But we're always looking for ways to improve the safety and efficiency of our road system. So when we do these monitoring programs, we do put on our list to look at the intersection improvements. And as you know, we have the adaptive signal program that we're currently implementing to improve TSM, or the coordinated signal system for the city as a whole, or along those corridors. So I was going to say, getting more into that detail, that's the type of item that I think would be helpful to discuss during our item when we bring the FY 2021 monitoring program to the agenda next month. Exactly what do we want to include in the scope of these monitoring program reports?
So for me, the growth management plan is pretty clear that we need to do what we can to maintain the service level that's required by the CFIP. And a lot of sections of the mobility element are cited in the staff report as saying, well, we need to emphasize other modes of travel. But the balance that's achieved in the mobility element is that table number 9 that you showed in your presentation. And that balance is created by the typologies. And all of these streets are just this handful of streets that are still prioritized for vehicles. And I find the argument that we need to now get rid of those priorities and make them all non-vehicle priorities. That's inconsistent with the general plan and the growth management plan, and that we need to do what we can. And the starting point to that is doing the more detailed analyses on these deficient, rather than declaring them deficient with a single traffic count in the middle of this long, stretch. We need to look at the individual intersections and segments as recommended by the method and in the GMP monitoring report study, that those be looked at. Okay, now the next question is on the state of California Housing and Community Development rule letter that says residential developments, you can't have a moratorium, but that doesn't preclude commercial developments from having a moratorium, or mixed use developments that are less than 2/3 residential. Is that true?
Mr. Contreras, would you like to address that?
I was trying to unmute myself there. So on this one, Commissioner Linke, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I'd say the answer is no. And when I was discussing this with folks on our team, one of the issues that came up was a technical advisory from the State Office of Planning and Research on implementing SB 743. And I'll paraphrase from what that technical advisory says. Basically, by adding retail opportunities to the urban fabric, this addition improves destination proximity in such a way that it tends to shorten trips and reduce VMT. I don't know if you're like this, but I really am assisted by way of an analogy or kind of a descriptive application of that. What made sense to me was an example with Starbucks. So, for example, if a Starbucks isn't currently located in an area, but then is constructed, it may have the effect of reducing VMT for those folks who every Saturday morning left their residential area to get their morning coffee. So the Office of Planning and Research didn't want to completely rule out that this kind of construction would have the opposite effect. It actually might serve to reduce VMT. Does that get at what you were asking?
Well, I mean, sort of. I think it's a creative expansion of what the act was in the actual letter. And I accept the fact that it's probably not, since we can't do a moratorium on residential development, that tool in our toolbox is not the most ideal tool. So historically, when we violate the GMP performance standard, as we're doing here, the main tool was to do a moratorium on development. Okay, so the city is saying, the state is telling us that we can't do it. We agree with that, and we're going to make more creative interpretations of this and say we can't even do it with commercial. So, okay, that's off the table. We can't use the tool that we used to be able to use. The other tool is for the city to do projects, street projects, but there was no evidence that there wasn't any detailed analysis of these to see if street projects can be done. Well, then the next level is what the city is saying we need to do TDM and TSM, but there's been no investigation of what TDM and TSM programs could be doing. And then another one of my questions was, there's a very, what I would consider strange paragraph in the staff report that seems to suggest that not only do we not, not only are we not going to investigate whether we can do these projects to address the problem, we don't even have to, because only pre-existing MMLOS deficiencies are necessary for us to do. And so I guess my next question is, what is that paragraph trying to imply? That at what stage do we consider something a pre-existing MMLOS that the city does not have to address?
So I'll stay with that question. I think it's important in the context of reading that portion of the staff report and the presentation. The application of MMLS in that context was not intended to apply to vehicular congestion. Instead, it was intended to apply to non-vehicular modes of travel, bike paths or pedestrian facilities. One of the things that we were discussing at a staff level on this was, if we were to read this otherwise about pre-existing deficiencies and trying to address them, if we were to read them in a different way, it would be akin to, one of the ways we thought of explaining it is creating a citywide public works project, where every single existing deficiency would need to be addressed. Instead, we're guided by portions of our municipal code that speak to growth management and provide that the city's focus is to construct improvements concurrent with new development. And those citations, if they weren't in the staff report, they're 2190.045, 2190.010, subpart A3. So I'm hoping that kind of gets at your question as well.
So is the shorter version of that answer that yes, every deficient MMLOS situation in Carlsbad currently would be not failing the GMP standard because it's pre-existing, and only if a new development came in would the city be compelled to address a deficiency?
I'm not sure if we could phrase it that way. I think the intention was just to say that we were applying this prospectively and not retrospectively. My understanding of the situation is that even when growth management plan was adopted way back in whenever it was, in 1986, there were, the idea was that even at that time there may have been existing deficiencies, but that those would, that they already existed. So I think what the sections that I cited earlier are trying to account for new development, and when faced with that new development, that's when the city would try and account for some of the existing deficiencies. But
okay,
that's
so
the best I can do.
In 1986, which MMLOS facilities were deficient? None of them, because we didn't have MMLOS and we didn't implement MMLOS until 2015. And the MMLOS in the mobility element says that we need to maintain a level of service D of all of those facilities on the non-vehicle prioritized streets. So this argument that apparently that as of 2015, everything that existed then was already, because it was already in existence, we're exempting it. That is, to me, completely opposite of what the mobility element was trying to say, that we need to maintain those facilities. I'm really confused by this paragraph, and I do not think it's appropriate for that paragraph to be included in the staff report to the city council, setting a precedent that somehow anything that was pre-existing is grandfathered in. My other point on that too is that this is not limited just to MMLOS. The lawsuit that's cited in that paragraph is about vehicle service, not. So you're saying that it only applies maybe to MMLOS, but the lawsuit is about vehicles. So that would mean that if that was applied, the same language in that paragraph was applied to vehicles, we would say that we have no deficiencies anymore because it's all pre-existing. And I just find that paragraph crazy. Next question is on exemptions. When the exemption power was proposed in the 2015 general plan update, it was very controversial, and I was part of that process. So I went through it. Two parts of the exemption language was changed during the review process that I fought for. One of them was the addition of a phrase in the mobility element policy 3P9, which has been cited tonight several times as being a reason we need to do an exemption, and it reads, evaluate the list of exempt street facilities as part of the GMP monitoring program to determine if such exemptions are still warranted. So the intent of that language was that if we exempt a street, but then later it meets the standard, then the exemption should be removed as part of the GMP monitoring process. So in my letter, I identified probably 6 or 7 different facilities that did not fail the performance standards. So why are those not being proposed to be unexempted or the exemptions removed from them as required by the general plan mobility element, policy 3P9?
Nathan, did you want to address that? And you're muted.
All right, am I back now?
You're back.
So just to, I guess, condense the question, this is going back to your, just the question in regards to why the exemptions were returned again.
No. Why the facilities in the new GMP monitoring report, there were, I can get the list of 6 or 7 different street facilities that were previously exempted. So the question is, based on the language that was added to the 3P9 right before the mobility element was passed to accommodate complaints, why aren't we seeing that list as for unexemption?
Gotcha. So that's something I think we can definitely consider. We can look at updating the monitoring report to address these. Meaning that staff can add in a list of the exempted facilities along with some specific findings and listing how their exemption is appropriate. Does that address your question?
No, I don't think you're understanding. So there have been a number of facilities that have already been exempted from the performance standard, but several of them, since they were exempted back in 2015, several of them now have been monitored for the first time. And it's been found that they do not fail the level of service D standard.
Right.
So the same policy that says you should exempt streets if you can't meet the standard, that same exact policy says that you should unexempt the streets that do meet the standard later. So the question is, why are those streets not in this staff report to be unexempted at the same time we're exempting some others?
So
maybe I can give it a try to hopefully address your questions, Commissioner Linke. I think specifically the ones that maybe you are thinking about or the ones that were originally exempted when the general plan was updated with a mobility element in 2015. And we can take a look at those, and I believe those are the ones that you're referring to. At that time, as I understand it, when it was prepared, the deficiencies were projected to be at build out, not that they were deficient at that moment in time. And so here last year, when we had presented in FY 2017-18, the first batch of 8 that were deficient, and some of them were exempted. As you may recall, not all of them were exempted. Of the ones that we are presenting tonight, there are only 7 of them that are brought forward, one of which was found to be deficient in December of 2019. That's the College Boulevard southbound from Ashton Avenue to Palomar Airport Road. But it was not exempted because there was a capital improvement program project that would assist with that deficiency. And then there was another one that was also expedited, which was on the southbound of Melrose Drive to Palomar Airport Road. If any of the ones that we have found since monitoring became, addressed so that the deficiency no longer exists, then we would be bringing those forward to unexempt them. So in the future, if that is something that as we monitor those particular facilities, then we would make that recommendation. So I think that's the point that you were making.
Yeah, so you said something very specific there, which is true, that those facilities that I'm talking about, and there are like 8 different segments that should be unexempted because they passed, were not supposed to be exempted until after build out. And so the second component that was added to the mobility element, in addition to that phrase that I discussed earlier, was that none of those streets were supposed to be exempted until College Boulevard and Poinsettia were completed. And that language was mysteriously disappeared from the mobility element just prior to the city council. It's more, I'm just going to use the word again, shenanigans. That language was deleted by somebody, I don't know who, I can suspect who it is, but that language should still be in there. And we have the language in 3P9 that says streets should be unexempted if they're passing. And these 8, and I can read them off, you know, eastbound La Costa Avenue from I-5 to El Camino Real between Palomar Airport Road and Camino Vita Roble. And there's 6 others I could read off that are in my letter. All of those passed. And so they should be, as far as I'm concerned, unexempted. And I don't understand why they're not in this, because they're part of the GMP monitoring this time.
Yes, sir. And again, those were the ones that were identified to already be exempted. And I believe it's in mobility element 3-P.10 that they were exempted and they were supposed to be at build out. And so that's our understanding. The ones that staff has recommended moving forward, we continue to monitor and had requested that they be determined to be built out and exempted, was for the first time was in last year's report. And those are the ones that were determined to be deficient. Some of them were determined to be built out now and exempt. Moving forward, including the ones for this fiscal year in this monitoring, if City Council determines them to be exempt now, based on the monitoring report, and in the future, for example, the College Boulevard extension gets built out, just as an example, perhaps the El Camino Real, College Boulevard, Cannon Road, street facilities are no longer deficient at that point in time. Certainly then those, whatever exemptions that have been made, if the deficiencies have been alleviated, can be removed from the list at that point in time. However, the ones that you mentioned, as far as the various segments, were actually part of the mobility element when it was passed by City Council and adopted in 2015. And the intent was that to be at build out. I don't know, and I don't think staff also knows with regards to what you were mentioning as shenanigans. What we have is the document as it currently exists and what was adopted by City Council. And that's what we are looking at with regards to to the deficiencies that were determined to be made at build out.
But I think you're getting it backwards. Those streets were not supposed to be exempted in its policy 3P11. They were not supposed to be exempted until after build out, as defined by the completion of College Boulevard and Poinsettia.
And I think perhaps if, you know, we can certainly note your concern, we can address it with our city attorney's office, because then it's the interpretation of the document that was adopted by city council and the interpretation of 3P9, 3P10, 3P11, and they can assist us with regards to what is written, not what was presented during draft version, but what is currently what exists. And then for the presentation on October 20th, we can have city attorney office address your specific question.
Okay, because I sat through those planning commission hearings, and it was a point of emphasis that that language was added in, both of those things that I described. And then one of them was removed, and the other one I think is being ignored. Okay, I want to finish up by, can I have, Nathan, can I have you put the slides up and just jump to number 7?
Yes, I will pull up your slides.
So I just came up with some examples using the most recent intersection data that's available of potential street improvements that could be done on various parts. Our TIA guidelines say that a dedicated right turn lane should be considered when you have 150 right turning cars in the peak hour. So keep going to there. Okay, so this is just an example of one of the intersections that's under exemption and the number of right turns. So all 3 of these legs exceed 150 right turns, but none of them have a dedicated right turn lane. And the next slide. And so that last one was Palomar Airport Road and Paseo del Norte. This is north of their Cannon Road and Paseo del Norte. So you've got 341 right turning cars and 1,105 going straight, but there's no dedicated right turn lane there. And I don't know how feasible it is, but I don't know that any of this was looked at. Okay, next slide. This one's on College Boulevard. It's not in the exempt area because that's on the other side of the street, but there's 347 right turning cars there, but no dedicated lane. Next slide. This is in an exempt area, and it's part of our current traffic impact fee program. There was money allocated for a dedicated right turn at Palomar Airport Road in El Fuerte. I don't know if that's been done. It wasn't done on this Google Maps thing. Next slide. And here's the Palomar Airport Road going over the railroad tracks towards Carlsbad Boulevard. Interestingly, our current traffic impact fee program has us doing a project there where it's widened to 2 lanes. Now, it's a very expensive project, and I wouldn't necessarily think that it's maybe a reasonable project at this point like it was back then. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But we've collected money, presumably for it. 20% of the estimated 18 million back in 2006 has been collected as part of the traffic impact fee program. So that money should be dedicated to improvements that will improve the situation on Palomar Airport Road. Okay, next slide. Okay, and this is the last thing I'll say. It's a complicated issue, and I know I'm taking a lot of time, but I think this is all important. So if you look at where it says 2018 on this map, it's pointing at the deficiency of southbound El Camino Real between Tamarack and Cannon, which is one of the ones we're being asked today to recommend an exemption on. And that blue asterisk there, right next to it, shows where a proposed development will add 2,300 new daily trips to that facility, and 55% of them will end up at the deficient El Camino Real Cannon intersection south of there. The proposed mitigation, though, is to provide 1 traffic signal controller and then bus passes to the residents, plus a bench and a trash can at 1 bus stop and a small bike rack in the project. And the buses in this area average like 2 or 3 riders boarding per day. So this mitigation is not sufficient, but there's no direct requirement for any street improvements or a fair share towards the College Boulevard extension or anything that this development is going to add traffic to, and they're relying on this exemption. So in their environmental impact report or in the staff report, they're saying basically we hope the city council approves this exemption so we don't have to do any more. If they don't, we'll have to reconsider it. And I'm not against this development. I just think they need to do their fair share. And by doing these exemptions, the city is deciding we're not going to do anything, but other parts of the city, I think, are not doing their part to make sure that developers who are adding traffic to these exempt facilities are generating their fair share. So I'm opposed to this in its current form unless the exemptions are linked to some additional activity that's going to be done by the city to help address them. I wouldn't support this. And I'm interested in hearing what other commissioners have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Lanke. And again, I want to just express our gratitude for all of the information that you present to this commission. I mean, I know it's a lot of time and data acquisition to get, so I really want to appreciate your work on this. Any other commissioners have questions? I see Commissioner Pensier.
One of the things we've been hearing is induced demand, especially with respect to College Boulevard, because of the inadequacy of Interstate 5 and the intersection with Route 78. And, you know, I guess I have, I think that the trying to build out or trying to mitigate these, try to meet level of service D everywhere will only push the can down the road until we get there again. And the only thing that would stop it is the other question I have is, what have we considered with respect to changes that may become more or less permanent with respect to COVID-19? You know, traffic dropped 50% right away. A lot of people now are working from home. They have their offices set up, and a lot of people that I know think that that's the greatest thing that's ever happened to them. And so their commutes have disappeared. And so all the time they spend on the roads stuck in traffic have gone away. Is just because we solved the problem with COVID-19, are those people going to be happy to go back to work if they can do everything from home? It's one thing that I think that we need to consider going forward before we spend a lot of money trying to make level of service D at some of these on some of these areas where we'd be better off trying to encourage people to use this this time to consider other forms of transportation when they need to get around. So some of the worst bottlenecks are, at least for cyclists, are some of the same ones that you've mentioned here that are failing level of service, particularly westbound Palomar Airport Road. And right before you get to Paseo del Norte, which is where this starts to fail, there are 4 through travel lanes going westbound. So one of my questions there is, how did we get to 4 travel lanes there when we're only supposed to have 3? Is did that happen so long ago that we decided that we were only going to go to 3 lanes, and that one just snuck through and it's now grandfathered? And finally, because of that, it's virtually impossible for Caltrans to provide Class 2 bike lanes to improve that crossing westbound. They can do it on the east side. they've presented things to the city now, and that's going to be a lot easier for cyclists to make that transition across. And the city is making some changes too that will make that bike lane continuous all the way through. On the west side, though, that is never going to happen. So a third part of my question is, if we're going to use TDM, then how much can we use education to help people overcome barriers like that? In other words, with the 2 national bicycle education programs that currently exist, the League of American Bicyclists and Cycling Savvy, the American Bicycle Education Association, both of those organizations can provide enough education for bicyclists to feel comfortable on any road as long as they are visible and act according to all the rules of the road, and also ride in the middle of the lane that's too narrow to share. So there are lots of things that can be done to educate cyclists who might then become commuters, which would reduce the number of cars on the road. So all of these things can impact TDM in a positive way, which would also reduce, the congestion for motorists as well. So it's kind of a win-win, and I think that's one thing we should consider putting some money into to help out in that regard. I had one other thing and I can't recall what it is right now. I should have wrote it down. But in any case, can you answer the question on the 4 lanes on Palomar Airport Road, how we got there, and if we're going to continue to do there? And are we considering what's going to happen post-COVID-19 with respect to the amount of traffic we see now versus what we'll see then?
So starting off on the question of what happened with the 4 through travel lanes, I don't know the history of that, so we can look into that and get back to you in a future meeting through our traffic engineers report. John, I don't know if you have anything to add at this point, and then we can address that.
I do know that what happened on Melrose Drive was kind of the genesis of the new mobility element, in that the deputy transportation director at the time looked at Melrose Drive with 4 lanes going northbound, dual right turn lanes going southbound, and looking at the extreme length of that pedestrian crossing and saying, I don't think it's practical for the city to build its way out of congestion. And so the idea, I think, started there as, well, there must be another way. We can't just keep adding lanes to our roadways. It's going to have a negative impact on other modes of transportation. And so I don't know exactly how the 4 lanes resulted on Melrose, but I do recall that was kind of like the impetus for the mobility element to get formed.
Well, they're not really through lanes. I mean, you got 3 going forward and
right. It's a trap, right?
And Pete mentioned the westbound PAR at PDM, and those aren't really through lanes either. 2 are really going forward, 2 are going to southbound 5, and 2 are going to northbound 5.
Kind of like auxiliary lanes or whatever you want.
Yeah, well, they're flow lanes, right? They're not. It's not a through lane deal, for traffic flow. It's how to flow people into northbound, southbound, and across over to Avenida Encinas. So,
to clarify, I said leading up to Palomar to Paseo del Norte. The 4 through lanes start right after Armada, after as you approach the Flower Field exit, and continue all the way to Paseo del Norte. where
No,
the bike lane
I agree,
backs
Pete.
up
Yeah.
to the right of the number 4 lane.
Yeah, no, I agree. But again, it's an initial flow. They're starting to flow people onto PDN North. There's a flower fields lane. There's a lane that goes to PDN North. You're going to get 2 lanes that end up on I-5 North. You get 2 lanes that go to I-5 South, and you get 2 lanes that end up on going to Avenida Encinas. So they just started at Armada to start spreading, and there's 2 that go south on PDN also. So at PDN you got 2, 4, 6, 7 lanes across. As it's flowing to different things. So again, I don't see a 4-lane issue on that, but anyway.
May I just add that particular section from Paseo del Norte to, if you go east or westbound, Palomar Airport Road east or west of Paseo del Norte is already exempt from the mobility element in 2015.
Yeah, we're just discussing the 4-lane deal, but
right. Anyway. And so the point being is that that was when the 4 criteria on 3-P.9 was prepared in 2015. And so those lanes would have been included and existed at that time.
That's what I was going to ask is when were those lanes developed? Because it may have predated when the design may have predated the 2015 timeframe.
They were definitely before 2015.
So that explains it.
Yep.
Commissioner Pansier, any other questions you need to follow up? And then Commissioner Hunter, I got your. No. Oh, okay, Commissioner Hunter.
So going back to Commissioner Linke's comments to help put it in, I'm against exempting things until we actually go through and work on it. I think the right turn lane things are definitely something to look at on those types of things. These going across I-5 on PAR, there's not a lot we're going to do there, but that right turn lane at PDN on the east going eastbound could help a lot. So again, I think we've a lot of them made sense. We're not going to expand underneath I-5 at Cannon either, but are there some TDM, TSM things that can be done to help move those things along? So I'm kind of in the same category as Commissioner Linke overall, although these are obviously logical intersections where we're not going to put an extra 3rd lane in. I mean, more than 3 lanes in. There's capital improvements with putting a bridge over I-5 and the railroad, trestle on the west side over there. Although I guess we're looking at some of those. And just from back to my friend Mr. Pensier's, or Commissioner Pensier's over there, traffic's already building back up again. Even when things were a little crazy, bikes were under 1% of the travel. Even if you double it for some reason, it's over 2%. I will never be going anywhere on a bike. I live in a hilly area and it's just not going to work, and I'm old. So, bikes are great. You guys know my bike. Well, a lot of you know my biking background. In the companies I used to run, they were all biking companies. So I love bikes, but bikes is not a major transportation program that's going to have anything in Carlsbad anytime in the next 20 years, regardless of COVID or not. Even if you could increase it by 500%, you might be pushing 5% of the flow. And I actually, we go overboard in Carlsbad for bikes, and I think it's great. But 99% of the people are in cars, and we still need to make sure cars flow. And I'd love it everybody stays at home and works from home, but that's not the case, and people are back out on the streets. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner Hunter. Any other questions or comments from Commissioners, I do have one, but Commissioner Linke and Commissioner Fowler, did you?
If Commissioner Fowler has something, he should go first.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Fowler, go ahead.
Yeah, so I appreciate Mr. Linke's work on this. And like a lot of things that have an enormous amount of complexity, and I've given briefings similar to things that Steve or Mr. Linke said, and I can watch people's eyes glaze over if they're not totally connected to what is being said and what's happening. And so I'll admit that, you know, I understand that the general ideas behind what he's done, and I respect that, and he's pointed out some things. In the end, there are a couple of things that are on my mind about that. And the ultimate question, though, is what next under Mr. Linke's model, and so what? What will come of it ultimately? And would it create a drastic or even noticeable change in the experience of driving through Carlsbad? And I guess I don't know the answer to that. And so, and maybe Mr. Linke can guide me more along that line. One of the things I think that always gets underplayed, because I'm pretty sure that nobody understands exactly what this is, except that if you look at the areas of concern like Marin Road and College and El Camino Real and Marin, so to speak, at the freeway there, those are people either leaving. I think a lot of that traffic, kind of by definition, is people taking shortcuts through Carlsbad to get to Oceanside. And so that brings so I brought this up a few years ago, and I said, well, so what's that percentage? And I think Doug I don't want to put words in his mouth, but my impression was, as 20% or 25%. And I don't dispute the figure, but I don't know where that came from. I think that would be surprisingly hard to create a study that would actually pin that amount down. Like you'd have to use, I would think that you would have to use the bane of my existence, the license plate readers, and then connect them with where they actually live and things like that. So it would be a pretty hard question to ask. And then the question comes, well, what if our estimates of the effect of travel through and shortcuts and everything, people getting from A to B, that doesn't really have anything to do with Carlsbad, except that's the way they go. And what's the consequence of that? Well, one thing is that it probably doesn't matter what we do specifically, the experience of getting through Carlsbad is going to be dominated by that. So then, but I may be wrong about that. Maybe it's less than 20%. I have no idea. But I'm worried about the fact that we probably don't have great data and that we're guessing about that. So I guess what I would say is that if Mr. Linke could say unequivocally that addressing those issues in the way he wants them addressed, would that create a substantial improvement of people's experience of traveling on Carlsbad streets? Or would it be a marginal improvement that you may or may not notice and all of that? I was scrambling around trying to figure out where with regard to Pinseri's point about what's going to happen after COVID, and I guess a substantial amount of the data came from 2018, but there was a study in May of this year. So that was right at the heart where people were really conscientious about, they don't want to go out and get sick. So that should show somehow a much better experience of our streets. And I don't know whether that's true or not. Looking over the numbers, somebody's going to have to explain that kind of thing to me. I don't have that. I'll look at the number and say, oh yeah, I totally get that. So then that gets back to my point. Okay, we can say, no, we don't agree with this and we need to have some alternative. And Mr. Linke's has his objections. And so what would be useful is to understand what would be the consequences of doing what Mr. Linke is suggesting, you know, maybe overall. What kind of improvement would that entail?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Linke. Actually, I saw you have your hand raised. Why don't you go first? Mr. Commissioner Linke.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So in answer to Commissioner Fowler's question, the first point I would make is I think the growth management plan and our general plan create a legal obligation for us to do this, but I think we should do it in a smart and reasonable way, not waste money doing things that aren't going to help a lot. So what I'm proposing here is that we follow the guidance in our own documents and in areas that are found to be deficient based on a single traffic count on a long stretch. Do the intersection analyses only in those areas. Don't do them citywide, just in the areas that are found to be deficient. And then people like Mr. Bilsey, who I think is there, if Doug's iPhone is Mr. Bilsey, he's working on the traffic signal plan or whatever it's called. And so that intersection analysis then might point to, we've got 350 right turns in our peak hour. Well, when that happens, if it's shared with a through lane, then you've got a whole bunch of cars backed up behind those 350 cars and they can't get through. But if you put a dedicated right turn lane in, that separates them and you improve it. So that's an example of an improvement. But if the intersection analysis or a feasibility study says, you know, we can't get the right of way to put a right turn lane in, then the intersection analysis data could be used by Mr. Bilsey or whoever working on the traffic signal program just to identify improvements that could be made under TSM. Or maybe, as Mr. Pensears has referred to, we could make other improvements related to improving bicycle or pedestrian access. All of these things are options, and when we're ready to declare a deficiency and say that we have to rely, instead of traffic projects, on TDM and TSM, we should at least look at take a realistic look at the traffic projects first before making that statement. And second, follow up on it with actually looking at TDM and TSM. What we've got in the staff report is we've got a single traffic count in each facility that says they're failing. We want to exempt them. When we exempt them, we should do TDM and TSM, but we're not going to do TDM or TSM. And then there's that bizarre legal paragraph that says we don't even have to do it because they're all pre-existing conditions, pre-existing deficiencies. And then when developers come in and they see that there's an exemption on the street that they're going to add traffic to, the planning department says you need to add a trash can at the bus stop outside of your development, and that'll take care of the 1,000 average daily trips that you're going to generate. No, so that, to me, this is all craziness, and we need to take a deeper look. And I'd invite staff to, you know, the traffic person, the traffic signal person, or Mr. Kim or whoever, to say, you know, if you're putting a dedicated right turn lane and there's 350 cars in a peak hour, is that going to help? I think the answer is yes. Can we optimize signals? I think the answer is yes. We just need to do the work instead of exempting it and then letting it drop.
Right. So I can address some of those questions regarding evaluating intersection improvements to improve the efficiency of the road facilities. We just got your PowerPoint presentation regarding the specific suggestions for the dedicated right-hand turn lanes. We can take a look at that. I noticed, as I mentioned before in my presentation, we have to look at the impacts to all the modes of travel. So by continually adding additional turn lanes, that does obviously impact the pedestrian mode of travel. And then, yeah, so that's the major concern. in regards to whether or not it would change the level of service rating or grade to a point where it would matter. We did, as I mentioned, we did a high level review, but I think it probably warrants going back and looking at your specific points that you make. I know like at Paseo del Norte and Cannon Road, there's not a crosswalk at that particular location. But then again, I don't know if that right-hand turn movement was the cause of the deficiency for that road facility. So I'm thinking it's not, but it definitely deserves a deeper dive. So I don't think, but yeah, I guess that's where I sit with it. But I understand your points, and that's another reason why I think moving forward, not saying addressing it in this monitoring program report, but in moving forward, I think it's good for us to discuss the approach on how we approach these monitoring programs in the future, so we can iron out these discussions before we actually go out and collect the data, and we're then constrained with what we've done in the past. So that's all I have to add.
All right. I have a couple of questions, and I know we've been we're 4 hours into this, so I'll try and make this brief. But in the on the agenda on table 3, the proposed actions for street not meeting LOSD standards, there's an area I wanted to just kind of discuss and just get input on this, where it's in regards to College Boulevard, from Carlsbad Village Drive to Oceanside city limits northbound. The question I have is that the affected local facility management zone, LFMZ, is designated for number 7, which is the designation. However, I just wanted to try and understand if we should include the affected zone of LFMZ 25. And if the commission's not familiar with this, LFMZ 25 is at Quarry Creek, as above and past, it's kind of in the outside of the Carlsbad area and to the west of, I think it's College Boulevard, and just south of the 78. So it's kind of in a little island. But that community is definitely affected by Zone 7, or what I'm talking about with College Avenue. So I'm trying to see if that would also, if we need to consider that LFMZ 25 in there, because it seems like to me that they're kind of an island, and that's their only direct route to get to Carlsbad or to get to College into the Carlsbad city limits. Does that make any sense, or is that clear of what I'm trying to picture of the location?
Nathan, do you want to start with that one?
I can see your point, Chair Perez, and looking at possible connections to that LFMZ that you're referring to. I don't have that actual map, but I'm aware of the area. So that's something we could consider making a revision to.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure, because that's a heavily, I mean, in regards to the LOS, that's really going to affect, I can't remember the population, but it's 1,000. I'm going to say that it's over 1,000 community members that live there. And so, to get there, you also have to understand that to get to work or to get to a school or even to ride your bike or things like that, there's definitely a lot of, you're going to be going through that Oceanside area and then back into Carlsbad via College. So I just wanted to, make that pinpoint. And then the last thing I wanted to understand was, in regards to the circulation, the street topography, I think there was a part where there was, and this is more of just for me to try and understand, is the street topology, I apologize, and MMLOS standard, and specifically targeting school streets where vehicles, modes are subject to the MMLOSD standard. Vehicular are no, transit is no, pedestrian is yes, and then bicycle is yes. But the question I have is if you're looking at that College area between Carlsbad Village Drive and and you're looking at northbound to the Oceanside city limits, where you have the two Tamarack areas. So that area is really, really unique in that it's a heavy corridor for traffic, but then also too, there's two schools next to it on the east side of College northbound, which is Calavera and Middle and Elementary School. But then also too, you have Hope that is on the west side on northern Tamarack. So I guess the question that I have is that is this excluding out the vehicular and the transit part? You know, if it's a street topology on there, and if hopefully I'm making sense on that, because it just seems to me that it's a little bit of I don't know. It just seems like there's two parts to this. So I don't know if I'm making sense on that, if I can get clarification.
Well, I think I can say that the level of service deficiency is on College Boulevard, but you bring up a good point, and that's a point I was trying to make in my presentation, that when you look at proposed candidate projects to improve the efficiency of the roadway, you need to look at all the users and specifically the cross streets involved. So yeah, those cross streets are school street typologies. So we'd have to consider the impacts to the school or the pedestrians using that intersection. So we also heard from a lot of residents that are concerned with speed and safe routes to school issues along that corridor as a whole. So yeah, it's all to be considered. And that was my point about considering the improvements in a balanced approach.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
So I hear Commissioner Linke's comments, and I would say that we can, you know, when we bring this issue forward in the next month's agenda, those are items which will particularly be focused on and come with some evaluation and some recommendations. And I saw Commissioner Linke, you had your hand raised.
Commissioner Linke.
So the last time we did deficiencies, staff first brought it to the city council to declare the deficiencies, but then said you would return later with proposed projects. And then a few months later, so there were 8 deficiencies the last year. And then a few months later, you came back with 4 of them with some proposed improvements. And then it was several months later after that where 4 additional ones came back with more improvements. If that's okay, why can't we go through that same process again and recommend tonight that, yes, based on those single traffic counts, those facilities technically are deficient, but before doing the exemption, staff should do the same thing they did last time and look into street projects, TDM and TSM projects, and do intersection analysis to see if things can be fixed, and then come back at a later date to resolve them.
Well, so
And I would make a motion to that effect.
okay, so I think
I would second that motion.
yeah, Ms. Gomez.
May I just clarify? Last time, Commissioner Linke is correct that we had 8 deficient street facilities. But as you may recall, what we had presented was actually 4 facilities back in December of 2019. And then we came back in May of 2020 to present for the other 4. And at that time in May, that was when City Council requested that we come back just with the resolutions, and that was when we came back in June. And so if I'm hearing what you're proposing, Commissioner Linke, it's a little bit different in the sense that what you are proposing is that that perhaps all of the 6 that are being presented tonight be parsed out, if you will, for them to be deficient, and then the determination for being exempt would be addressed for all 6 separately in another presentation. Did I understand your proposal correctly? Because I think it is a little bit different if that is the case.
So the last GMP monitoring report, I think, went to council in July of 2019.
The first time.
Right. So, and if I remember correctly, you had identified all 8 deficiencies at that July meeting, but then City Council asked you to look into addressing them. And then the first 4 were addressed in December of 2019. And then the remaining 4 were addressed in May. And then there was an additional meeting, yes.
City Council did not make a determination in July of 2019. They were presented, and so when we came back in December of 2019, we asked for the 4 facilities to be deemed deficient, and whatever actions were taken in December of 2019.
So what occurred in July? I'm trying to remember.
In July was the very first time that that we had the monitoring results, and so staff at that time made a presentation and a request. You're correct that at that time we had asked for things to be deficient and built out and exempt, and at that time the council had said, take a look at other things such as maybe financing options for College Boulevard, because perhaps the College Boulevard extension can help mitigate some of those deficiencies. And so, so basically looking at other options instead of just a moratorium at that time, which I recall staff was recommending coming back within 90 days. So that was my recollection of what had occurred in July. So we came back in December for the first 4.
Right. So I just looked it up, and it was the July 16th, 2019 City Council meeting. And the first part of it, recommended action was to adopt a resolution to determine the following 8 street segments to be deficient according to the GMP circulation performance standard.
Correct.
So I guess what I'm proposing is that if we did it that time, we can do it again. We can have City Council, if it's important to staff to not delay this action, to determine that these new 6 facilities are deficient, but then have staff go back and do intersection analysis, TDM and TSM, and look for projects that might reduce or eliminate the deficiency.
Yeah, so, with regards to the presentation, as was explaining back in July of 2019, that request at that time, there was still a lot of moratorium information that needed to be vetted. City Council did not vote that they were deficient, and had actually asked the city manager to come back with additional options. And so what staff is proposing on the next steps is October 20th is going to City Council with a presentation similar to what is presented tonight, with a little bit of additional information on the GMP. And that's what staff is proposing to present to them.
Okay, I accept that, but the 8 segments were reported as being deficient in July of 2019, and they weren't addressed. Maybe the City Council didn't vote to do it, but we can say that they voted in December and May to address 4 deficiencies each on each of those 2 dates. So is there any way we can? Is there any way staff would suggest that we could, if the rest of the commission is in agreement, that maybe we could do a little more analysis on these deficiencies? Is there a proposed way that staff would have to go forward?
So one of the things that I think we need to take a look at is it certainly can be recommended by the commission. What that would entail would then be delaying the entire presentation, or are you proposing that the presentation still go through to City Council on October 20th, but to bifurcate it so that the request would be to make the determination that the 6th Street facilities are deficient, but not make a recommendation on them being exempt. Is that what I'm hearing you proposing?
If that's a realistic thing, that's staff, we want to comply with the law, and staff's, need to look at or desire to look at it, or maybe they don't, but I just want to try to work with staff here to come up with a way to have you look at these in more detail in the way I've said, and how that's done is I don't care necessarily how it's done. What you just said sounds fine to me, though. Bifurcating it with showing the deficiencies at the next meeting, and then looking at the improvement projects that are possible.
So then in essence, what it does is splits it up into 2 presentations, and I would defer to Mr. Contreras with regards to if he sees any legal issues with doing it that way.
I don't see any immediate legal issues with doing 2 presentations. One thing that I did want to add to this conversation is that our municipal code requires that these presentations be brought to the City Council. But I wrote here in my notes that, yeah, we have to do an annual report to City Council, and that's in 2190-130 subpart D. As long as we're meeting the annual reporting to council requirement, we don't have any issue whether we break it up. But that's what I have to add.
So council, excuse me, so council, just looking at the recommendations from the staff. So staff support recommendation to City Council. 1 is to receive and file the GMP and general plan annual monitoring report circulation section. So that part of 1 is what we're talking about, of the bifurcation on there. But then also 2, we have 2 other points: determining 6 street facilities deficient, and then determining 6 deficient street facilities built out and exempt from vehicular level of service. So it seems to me like 1 is something that we can work on, but it seems like we still have 2 and 3 that's in question, right? Of the 6 versus the 8, or am I missing that part?
Not versus 8. I think what Commissioner Linke was proposing was perhaps number 1 and 2, which is the 6th Street facilities being deficient, and then splitting out number 3 and presenting that at a future council meeting. Is that what I'm hearing, Commissioner Linke?
Yeah, or actually, support recommended action number 1, which is filing it, and 2A, which is determining them to be deficient. But then it's 2B that is the one that does the exemption. So I'd like to bifurcate 2B and ask if staff could do those additional analyses to determine if there are any projects that could be helpful. And maybe there won't be any, but make reasonable efforts to including intersection analysis and looking at TDM and TSM.
Okay, and then also too, sorry for interrupting Commissioner Linke. Also too, there was the comments of next steps. Traffic and Mobility Commission consider creating an ad hoc committee to address the MMLOS issues. And then I think there was some other, can we include that in there? Is there any way we can incorporate all this to make it one big motion, or is that something we have to do separately for next steps?
I think we should do it separately.
Okay.
So I
would think separately. Mr. Contreras, do you have a preference?
I don't have one strong feeling on it legally, but I agree separate would probably be better. That would be my preference.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I guess right now we're on the floor. There was a motion, so can we get can we jump back to this motion, and do we need to re-clarify, or how do we go through that to?
Can you state the motion, Mr. Linke, Commissioner Linke, please?
Okay. Back. Okay, so I move that we support staff's recommendation 1 and 2A, which is receive and file the attached GMP/general plan annual monitoring report. And 2A is recommend adoption of a resolution to determine the 6 street facilities as being deficient.
Okay.
But I recommend to bifurcate 2B to give staff time to do additional analysis on the deficient street segments.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
Second it.
Second by Commissioner Hunter. So we can go for a vote.
Commissioner Wanamaker,
Oh wait, I don't see Commissioner Wanamaker.
I don't see him.
I don't see him on the list anymore.
I don't either.
Okay. Would that be, you mean, would that to abstain or
Absent.
absent?
Yeah. So Commissioner Linky,
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Pensiers,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Acting Chair Perez.
Yay.
Okay, the motion passed 5-0, and Chair Gokan abstain and Commissioner Wanamaker abstain.
Okay, thank you.
Well, they're absent, not abstain.
Yeah.
Not abstain, I'm absent. You're
Thank
right.
you. Thank you,
Thank
Commissioner Hunter. So for the next part, do we need to discuss the, sorry, I'm blanking out. Next steps, Traffic and Mobility Commission consider creating an ad hoc committee to address the MMLOS issues?
Right. I think you have a couple of alternatives to doing that. Our suggestion is to form the ad hoc committee similar to what we did with the Sustainable Mobility Plan. I think that provides a greater focus on it with that committee. Another alternative is we could bring back a series of reports to the full commission, but that would be a more lengthy, I think, and time-consuming process.
Okay, I can't recall for the ad hoc, do we have to have a motion or do we just, yeah, I'm sorry about I need procedures on this.
Yeah, I believe you did have a motion for creating the ad hoc committee for the Sustainable Mobility Plan, because we had to come back and switch out a member.
Yes, you need to have a motion.
Okay. Anyone would like to make a motion?
Well, should there be, yeah, I guess you can make the motion for that, and then I guess you can discuss the membership for that ad hoc committee.
Correct. Commissioner Lanky, you had a question? Or
I'm willing to serve on the committee, but I'm certainly also willing to have anybody else do it. So I don't know if we need just 2 other people or 3 other people.
Yeah, I'd like to be on that committee.
I see Commissioner Pensier is volunteered. And do we need one more?
Yeah, we would need a committee of 3.
I will step in. Anyone else does not want to.
Yeah, I move that we form an ad hoc MMLOS committee composed of Vice Chair Perez, Commissioner Pensiers, and myself.
I'll second. I can.
Why don't we just put Mona on it? She's not here.
Troublemaker.
Yes. All right. I second the motion.
Okay.
If we can come to a vote.
Yeah. Commissioner Linky,
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Pensiers,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Aye.
Acting Chair Perez.
Yay.
Okay, motion passed 5-0 with Chair Gokan and Commissioner Wanamaker absent.
You're muted.
Sorry, I'm muted. Commissioner Lenke.
Yeah, I should probably quit while I'm ahead, but I just want to bring up that pre-existing deficiencies paragraph. It's very troubling to me. I think it sets a precedent that we basically don't ever have to do anything again. I don't know if staff is willing to voluntarily remove that, or if they're really devoted to that. If they are, I don't know. It's just, I won't say anything more, but it's really troubling to me.
I'd like to just add a comment, Chair, if I may. What I heard from our city attorney's team is that specific paragraph that was added is not relevant to the vehicular LOS. So we can discuss that item as a part of the ad hoc committee efforts for the other MMLOS modes of travel.
So then why is it included in this agenda item? Then it should be easy to remove it because this is only vehicle, right? So just take it out then, and we can discuss adding it back in once the MMLOS stuff comes back.
I think one thing I'd like to add here is that we, the city, have been sued in connection with the GMP monitoring itself. And we, the city, have engaged outside counsel in defending that litigation. To the extent that tonight's presentation involved the discussion of the GMP generally, outside counsel was involved. The same outside counsel who's defending the city was involved in reviewing the staff report. So many times when litigation is involved, our office defers to the litigators who are defending the city. To the extent that that provision is necessary, I ultimately defer to the litigation and to those who are defending the city's interest in connection with the GMP litigation. We can relay that comment of yours, Commissioner Lenke, to our outside counsel through the ad hoc committee, as Mr. Frank mentions, but I can't promise or guarantee or commit at this time to any change of the language just yet, because I don't want to frustrate the litigation.
Okay, I just want to put a stake in the ground that I wasn't aware that that paragraph had any relevance in a lawsuit, but I understand that, but I think we need to look into that in more detail and not let that become a precedent.
That's fair. Yeah, that comment is so noted, and I'm happy to work with the subcommittee where on that point and look into that. But so noted.
Thank you. Okay, I think. Oh, go
if
ahead.
I may, just one point of I'm sorry. One point of order. As mentioned, we're going to City Council on October 20th. And as we have done in the past, we invite and encourage participation from the Traffic and Mobility Commission as part of our presentation. And so just wanted to find out who it is that will be joining us on October 20th.
Wow, okay. Since we don't have Chair Gokin, well, is there, Commissioner Lenke?
Could we, I have no problem with Chair Gokin doing it. Could we nominate her but have a backup? And I'm willing to be the backup, or I'm willing to support anybody else being the backup for those who may not think I have the temperament to do it or something.
Yeah. Not laughing at your comments, Commissioner Lenke, but can we nominate a commissioner that is, or sorry, the chair that's absent and vote that? I guess we just put that out there, or?
Of course we can.
Yeah, you can. And I like the conditional part too about the motion, because then if the chair has a conflict, the motion can be structured in a way that, if in the event of a conflict, if Chair Gokin is unavailable, then this person, the backup person, would theoretically not have a conflict. So.
Okay. Well, if we have do we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we stick Mona with it, and if Mona doesn't make it, then Commissioner Linke will do it with his temperament regardless.
I second.
Second by Commissioner Lanke, so we'll have a vote. Ellie, you're mute, thanks.
Commissioner Linke,
Aye.
Commissioner Fowler,
Aye.
Commissioner Pensiers,
Yes.
Commissioner Hunter,
Yes.
Acting Chair Perez.
Yay.
Noted that motion passed 5-0 with 2 absents, Chair Gokan and Commissioner Wanamaker.
And Chair, if I may, I'd like to say a few comments before we move on.
Sure.
I just wanted to again the Commission for addressing this issue. It's as we all know, it's extremely complicated. I see that issues come up in the length of time when data is collected. Actually, even before that, when the decision's made on how data is going to get collected, until the time that we are writing reports to present the findings. So I really look forward to having discussions with the Commission in advance on our approach on how we're going to be establishing the monitoring program, and you know what's that way we can take that feedback and incorporate that into our approach for the program moving forward. So again, appreciate all the comments. Look forward to working with the ad hoc committee and look forward to getting back to you with further analysis on these road facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Okay, with that said, I believe we are done with this agenda.